Hello, everyone. Welcome to Students of S.H.I.E.L.D. Weekly. I think that's what this is called. This is our final episode of the year. Only like a couple books came out the week of Christmas due to the holidays and Diamond and comic stores kind of being a little lax. So there are a few key issues that we may tack on and cover next week or whenever we pick up, and those are mostly incoming from Marvel, their big one shot which teases the next events and various things within their key series. Criminal number 11, because a lot of us really love that book, and maybe some other stuff. And so this week we are not reading those. We do have one retro book which we'll get into in a second, and otherwise it's kind of our year-end wrap up. Mike is not able to join us this episode. If he has any key thoughts, he may be able to tack them on in the beginning or the end of the.
Or you can leave a comment and we can.
Or that. But I'm Vincent, and I'm joined by the people whose names are also on the screen.
Daniel.
I'm Matt.
Yes. So our retro book. We picked an interesting one this week. It is Action Comics Weekly, number 636. And the format of this is that for, a year or some amount of time, Action Comics became a weekly comic instead of monthly or whatever it was before and after. And it did not star Superman. And it had a rotating selection of backup stories, including one Superman, which takes an interesting format, and we'll get to that. Mm-hmm. But 636, this was partly using random number generation, but this was a good one to latch onto because pretty much every single one of these stories is part one of a serial, and three of them are the first time, or like a few of them are the first time that they've been in Action Comics Weekly, whereas some of them would repeat and things like that. So we're going to get to it. This is January 1989. There are 5 short stories plus one, and Matt is going to start us off with the first one.
That's right. So the first story in this issue is about Speedy, and it's called Exiles. It's written by Mike Verheiden with pencils by Lewis Williams, and I've never heard of either of them. So this should be interesting. It starts with Speedy on the phone, I think. No, he's just talking to his daughter, and he gives her his entire backstory about how he was trained by Native Americans to shoot a bow, and then he met Oliver Queen, who has worse facial hair than me, and then he meets Cheshire, and they have a baby, and now he's apparently out of the superhero game. He's trying to get a job because he needs to pay for his baby to, eat and be alive. And he decides he wants to be a PI. And so he goes into this detective's office, and it's in the middle of being shot up by a dude who found out his wife's cheating on him, which I guess is funny or something. And the dude gives him a case. He says, all right, listen, this dude named Phil, his brother is missing, and I'll give you 50% if you go find him. So Speedy leaves his daughter with a neighbor, and he goes to go and find Phil's brother. And on his way, he runs into a woman who is having her purse stolen. And he's like, well, I guess it's time to do some superheroing. And that's where the issue, not the issue, obviously, that's where the story ends. It's not very entertaining. It's fine. It's fine. I guess it was cool to see Speedy's entire background, because I personally didn't know it that well. But I don't know. It's kind of boring.
Yeah, so I thought this was pretty rough. I was confused too with their narration, because sometimes he's directly talking to Leanne and is addressing her, but then sometimes it's in third person. And there's like one confusing panel looking at a piece of paper, but for a half second you're like, oh, is he writing something on it? and I think there may be a panel with a phone in
Yeah.
view. So I don't know if he's jumping between where he's explaining his backstory, like telling his daughter, telling other people, writing it down, and whatever it is, it's a little rough and confusing.
It's not a very good framing device.
Yeah, the art's very standard too. There's not much to say about this. Mark Verheiden, I don't know if he started in comics or started elsewhere, but he's been involved with some TV and film stuff. He was like a writer on Daredevil, Constantine, but his comic stuff goes back quite a while too. In like the late 80s, he did a lot of the Alien and Predator stuff for Dark Horse, and he also did a bunch of like scattered Superman work in the 2000s.
Okay.
But I don't think no one's ever gone crazy for stuff that he's done. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of the same thing. Nothing too crazy. Yeah, I just feel like with a lot of these stories that we'll talk about here today, I don't feel like a lot happens in any of them, so it's kind of hard for me to get into it. But like you said, it's serialized, so I guess that's the reason why. But yeah, just not really much to write home about.
Well, it's basically presents, which I don't think we've covered any of those issues on the show before. So maybe eventually we may get to those. And you'll have your stinkers and you'll have your gems, and there may be periods where there's only gems or only stinkers. So the next story here is The Demon by Alan Grant, Mark Pacella. And similar to the last one, and similar to a lot of great comic books, in my personal opinion, especially of this era, you get a quick summary of Jason Blood and Etrigan's origin. But at the same time, since we're only working with 7 and 8 pages in these stories, it's taken up a page and a half. So in this format, it's kind of iffy, but you also have to consider that most of these stories, when they're done, will be like 64 pages or something like that. But begrudgingly, Jason Blood goes in an exorcism case, and I like how he does it like very clinically and nonchalantly. Like the demon in this little boy like tries to screw with him, and he's like just ignores him. And he excises the dumbass demon, who then attacks him and forces a transformation to Etrigan, who then proceeds to eat the demon and then turns to potentially eat the boy. And that's where the story ends. That's the story. Not a ton happens, but on some of these stories, because they have a somewhat historical significance, I might have more to say about the stories on that level. There wasn't that much to say about Speedy, but this follows the slight tweaking of the demon by Alan Moore in his Swamp Thing run, and as well as his miniseries by Matt Wagner from a couple of years ago.
Interesting. And
this runs slightly parallel to the demon's appearance in Cosmic Odyssey by Starlin and Mignola. And this is the only demon serial in Action Comics Weekly, but the same writer, Alan Grant, will get an ongoing demon series just over a year from now. But artist Val Simex, however you say his name, will replace Mark Pacella. And as far as I can tell, this is Pacella's first major superhero gig after doing some minor, little in the corner, more indie stuff before this. But just a couple of years after that, he is suddenly on a huge stage because he's put in the unenviable position of picking up X-Force when Rob Liefeld leaves for Image. And then he in turn follows Rob shortly thereafter and works on some Extreme Studio stuff. And at that point, that's when Greg Capullo comes into X-Force. But Pacella never really became a superstar, as far as I can tell. And his solo potential could have been fully realized when finally in 1999, book Tooth and Claw. But right as that series goes like 3 issues, he leaves to do Hollywood work. And as far as I can tell, he's still kicking, doing storyboards and more behind the scenes and more lucrative stuff. But then, as I was looking into Tooth and Claw, there's another interesting trivia there, because that 1999 obscure Image book was embarrassingly dredged up in 2014 when Kurt Busiek and Ben Dewey tried to put out a comic with the same title, also published by Image, and apparently no one figured that out until after it was solicited. And so that book, that Kurt Busiek book, had to change its name to The Autumn Lands. And it's a little forgettable, but it's fine. Same with this demon story. What did you guys think about?
I liked it more than I think any of the other stories. Sorry.
No problem. I was just going to say quickly as well, similar to Marvel Comics Presents, is that a lot of these characters are more minor. So it's also a chance that, especially since both of you are a little bit less familiar with the DC realm, I'm not sure, how much Demon you've ever read or seen. But
Zero. I'm sorry for jumping on top of you real quick. You're lagging a little bit. So, anyway, what was I saying? Oh, I like the story more than the rest. I think if I were to pick one story that I would continue from here, it would be this one. I thought that the possession scene, the exorcism scene, was pretty neat. I'm not a huge fan of Etrigan speaking in rhymes. I know that's his gimmick, but I'm not really into it. I don't know. I dug it, I guess.
Yeah, I thought the art was pretty interesting in this story too. Kind of plays into the whole theme of the story itself. Yeah, I mean it's definitely up there.
Cool. On to the next one.
Okay, so the next story is a Phantom Stranger story. I guess it kind of seems like a rejected Twilight Zone script. So there's this saxophonist, and he's penniless and homeless and living on the street. He runs into this rich old dude who he once knew because he recorded for his dad's label, and then they took his money and screwed him over entirely. And this old man gets real freaked out running into him. He can't face him because he knows what his family did to him, and he runs away. So that night, the saxophonist shows up outside his house, playing the saxophone, and he puts a spell on his children, and he's going to take his children away. And the old man comes out with a gun. He's going to kill him. And then the Phantom Stranger shows up and says, "Nah, don't shoot him. Don't do something you're going to regret." And then he deals with the music. Phantom Stranger gets taken by the music in a scene that looks really cool, even though I don't fully understand what's happening. And then it just ends, and the old dude and the saxophonist talk it out, and they go off to discuss what they're going to do going forward. I liked it, I guess. Phantom Stranger didn't do anything in this issue. You could have taken Phantom Stranger out entirely, and it would have been almost exactly the same. But it was a fine story. It was whatever.
I liked how they used like the music notes though. I mean that was an interesting choice. Kind of going that whole aspect of it. I thought it was kind of a clever way.
I think it was visually super cool, even though I don't exactly understand what was happening to Phantom Stranger and how he overcame it, because he kind of didn't. He just stopped. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say that Phantom Stranger, I mean, you said a few comments which tied into this, that he is, as far as I can tell, often used as kind of a Twilight Zone / Tales from the Crypt type of host, and then Deus Ex Machina towards the end of the story. I think that's how a lot of his stories, especially the traditional ones, go.
Okay.
And then this is written by Paul Kupperberg, who does a Phantom Stranger miniseries with Mike Mignola, I think, after this. But it's drawn by Andy Kubert, and I think this is very early pencils from him as well, because he had a little bit of arguably some nepotistic help into the business, since his father was the legendary Joe Kubert. Probably had a free ride to his family comic book cartooning school, the Kubert School, and started off doing like lettering odd jobs at DC and drawing some occasional Sergeant Rock, which was like his dad's like baby. But eventually after this, Andy Kubert, similar to Pasella, everything is connected. Andy Kubert had the gig of replacing Jim Lee on Agents of the X-Men, and he had a very long run on that book, like basically like issue like 13 to 50 or something like that, interiors. for the most part. And then he did all kinds of high-profile, heavily promoted stuff past X-Men. I mean, he did 1602 with Neil Gaiman. He did Wolverine Origin. He did Orson Scott Card's Ultimate Iron Man. And all three of those things I don't like. He's one of the industry's top artists alongside his brother. And at a certain point, both of them they were the last stragglers alongside John Romita Jr., where they're like, yeah, we don't need to have loyalty to Marvel. They're not giving us anything extra. So Schubert's most recent thing was doing Tom King's Walmart Superman stories, which I think ended. So look out for Andy Kubert announced on something somewhat shortly. His brother is moving on to Wolverine soon.
You don't like 1602?
Not really.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm not really generally into alternate universe type of deals. And,
yeah.
And I think I've mentioned this somewhere. I will remind people, and those who don't know, that Neil Gaiman basically took the job of 1602 so that he could afford his lawsuit against Todd McFarlane over Angela, which he then gifted or sold to Marvel.
I love that. That's amazing.
All right, now we've got a little odd interlude in the middle of this issue.
Yeah, so we've got a 2-page Superman story where he flies back from outer space. It's in the middle of another story, I have to assume, because it just comes out of nowhere. He flies out from outer space, and there's like a cult who worships him, and it turns out that Darkseid is behind it. That's it. That's what happens.
Yeah, there's not much to say here. The one thing, this was kind of the anchor to Action Comics Weekly, which kept it sort of a Superman book, not really. They had these 2-page spreads, and they're supposed to mimic like a newspaper strip style, which they do more or less. It's 3 long. Ran through every single issue of Action Comics Weekly, except for like 1 or 2, which were like full-length crossover stories. And the entire run of these are collected in a book called Superman: The Power Within. And they're all the same creative team, Roger Stern and Chris Warren. I don't have anything to say about it. This format doesn't really interest me. I'm not sure if it would be different if I read the entire thing in one, but that's it. Very traditional Superman.
Yeah, it was fine. It was neat to see Roger Stern name on the page.
All right, so the next story is Phantom Lady. So just off the bat, no idea. I have no backstory on this character at all. I will say though, before I get into the actual synopsis, the art in this story I thought was probably the best in the whole book.
No, you're wrong. Keep going.
Why
Sorry,
not?
keep going.
What? I thought it was like the cleanest art in the whole book. Anyway, we can debate that later. Anyway,
yeah.
Open to Marie and Dee graduating from a college. So they're kind of going back and forth about them, helping each other out throughout their years in this college. And then we pan to the present, I guess, where we see Dee meeting her dad, who is an attorney general, and she's talking to him about her time in college and how she learned to do all these martial arts things. And the dad's just like, "Oh, you're silly. What are you talking about?" And he kind of shoos her and his assistant out of the door, and he meets up with these shady lobbyist people that were in prison and stuff, munitions lobbyists, I think they are. And then after they leave, Dee kind of sticks out an umbrella. They trip over and she runs out. And then at the end, we see Dee practicing her fighting skills with her roommate at her apartment. And that is the end of the story. So again, I don't really know what the setup is coming for this. But this doesn't really I don't know. I just feel like with some of the Marvel Comics Presents stories, they felt a little bit more connected, at least for a 7-page story. But this is, I don't know what this is. I'm really confused. But yeah, Why don't you guys like this art? I'm kind of curious as to why you don't like it.
Because it's awful. Look at those faces. Are you serious? It's like it looks like Mark Bagley drew it high. It's awful.
What?
It's so
I
bad.
think some of them look okay.
There's no way you think this is better than Kurt Swan Superman. You can't. You can't tell me that. Daniel, tell me what you like about this art.
It's readable. It's legible.
Oh,
the panel lays out.
it's visible. It's on the page.
You can make out what it is. I don't know. I guess I have taste for shit. I don't know.
I mean, Faust, am I wrong?
No, I mean,
keep your Austin bias out of here. Am I wrong?
No, I don't disagree with you. I could see like it's got a cartoony vibe to the faces as well. I could see it like it's kind of in the Amanda Connor vein, but I don't like it.
No.
But I will take the opportunity to talk about the artist, which is why I find it hilarious that Dan said this is his favorite. That the art is drawn by Chuck Austin, the Chuck Austin, who started out as an artist. And it's interesting to note that in his early art career, actually Chuck Beckham, but at this point he's changed his last name to Austin. And this is his first mainstream gig, quote unquote. But this follows contributions to Alan Moore's classic Miracle Man, which connects sort of not really back to how I mentioned 1602 and the Neil Gaiman lawsuit, because Miracle Man was tied up in Eclipse, which Tom McFarlane thought he bought.
He thought he bought? What the?
And he did some like small press work, writing and drawing, like some of it autobio, some of it like straight up like porn comics, basically. But I guess that work in like the late 80s and through the 90s got him on the Marvel Knights radar of those editors and creators, and moved to him drawing Elektra with Brian Michael Bendis. And somehow from Elektra, he moves on to the kind of sort of acclaimed US War Machine, which he wrote and drew, and it was Marvel Max and it's black and white.
Oh shit! Yeah.
From that, I guess, for a brief moment, at a certain point, he was writing at the same time in the same month, Uncanny X-Men, Avengers, and Action Comics. And along that run, along his writing run, he also touched Captain America, JLA, and X-Files before eventually being basically straight up blacklisted from the industry due to fan backlash. So it's funny to see him here.
Man, you mentioned it last time we recorded one of these, last episode. You mentioned that Chuck Austin did some art in this, and I was really hoping it would be good. And I'm really upset that it's just as bad as his writing.
Yeah, it's
at least in this issue.
Yeah, I'll talk a tiny bit about the actual story as well, because this version of Phantom Lady, I mean, the character itself goes back to the Golden Age, and technically you see the original, you see her legs. She's the one speaking at the commencement because she's the head of that school. That's the original Phantom Lady going back to the Golden Age is Sandra Knight of the prestigious Knight family, which also connects to the Starman and Manhunter legacies. And Dan was saying like she and her classmate are talking about how they helped each other through school, which is true. But they're also talking about how they're wearing nothing under their gowns except for guns. And it's just a really weird conversation.
It's so weird, and there's so much of that in this. Whatever. Go ahead.
And then in the end, when she kicks the board with her roommate, what she's wearing is kind of sort of her costume. It's also interesting to note that the cover of this issue, this is the most prominent feature on the cover. And I think she looked. I'm not certain who drew the cover or that part of the cover, but I think she looks better on. I mean, it's a cover, so it's somewhat understandable. But she looks way better on the cover than within the issue. This is Price's version of Phantom Lady, and I don't think anything really gets done with her, like besides this and a few key guest appearances. and then she dies in Infinite Crisis, and then there's a third one created after Infinite Crisis. DC, it's one of those characters DC's never really known what to do with Phantom Lady, and obviously there are some obvious reasons that you can, on her design, that you can understand why it might be complicated to pull in the character to modern audiences. So our final story here is Wild Dog. This is written by Max Allan Collins and drawn by Terry Beattie. This creative team was already known by comics fans for creating the crime noir title Miss Tree, which is recently being reprinted in a definitive versions by Titan Comics. But Collins, by this point, also wrote post-crisis Batman, and he was the one who adapted Jason Todd to the new continuity and pulled off his new origin. And Terry Beattie is known otherwise, besides Miss Tree, for inking basically almost everything, almost all of the comic book tie-ins for the DC animated shows, mostly Batman, I think. Wild Dog, this is not his first appearance. There was a miniseries before this. So Wild Dog, we started this issue with him throwing a drug dealer through a window and effectively into a hospital bed. And his buddy, who is in on his secret identity, Lou, breaks down how complicated that whole crime fighting is to him, because that dealer was providing money to his single mother and all of his siblings. But at the same time, Wild Dog points out, like, yeah, but he also has a gold chain. But then his friend is like, well, if you're super poor, like, you'd want a gold chain. You'd want to have something nice in life. And so to kind of balance it out, they figure out, all right, here's this young black kid, unrelated to the dealer. At first, I thought it was going to be one of his siblings, but there's no real connection made. It's just some young black kid who shows up, and he's like, hey, I heard you have a job. And because Wild Dog, by day, his secret identity, he is a mechanic. He runs an auto body shop. He gives the kid a job, like sweeping the floor and doing kind of odd jobs, assistance, for minimum wage. But he'll give him a raise if he does well, and also he gives him an advance. And it's kind of balancing the scale. It's kind of, this is like what everyone bitches about Batman not doing, sort of. But Wild Dog is based in the Quad Cities, where Iowa and Illinois meet. And he's got this ridiculous amateur costume, but honestly, it's not far off from the Punisher. And I don't know, I like this. This is my favorite story. It's pretty dated, 30 years later, but it's dealing with street crime in like a somewhat realistic and more in-depth way than you'll get in the Punisher. But also, Wild Dog at times gets to be in the background of major events like Invasion and Infinite Crisis. What do you guys think of Wild Dog? I love this character, half ironically.
I didn't care. I have no real strong opinions one way or the other. I thought it was the end of the book.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was kind of, I thought it was pretty well organized in the beginning with that whole scene, fighting against those people and stuff like that. But yeah.
All right, that is Action Comics Weekly number 636. It's quite a long thing, which was somewhat expected based on the format and also based on my nature. So now we're going to move into our year-end wrap-up, what the whole show is about. And our first segment, we're going to do our top 5 series from 2019.
Yes.
How do we want to do this? Do we want to do this person by person?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go one at a time.
Sure.
Okay. Does anyone want to pull the short straw, or should we just go left or right?
I think left to right makes sense.
All right. My top 5 series in order, sort of loosely. Number 1, I got to give it to Criminal. Criminal is a book that I have several of the older trades. I've always known that it's amazing. And I think, my heroes have always been junkies, which is like Criminal adjacent. came out before this ongoing, and I got it when it came out and read it and really loved it. So I was finally, despite never following the series closely before as it was coming out, jumped on this series. Mike and Dan joined me, and I've loved every single issue. Brubaker and Phillips, it's just like, I think it would be hard to think of another writer and artist team, especially one that works across multiple series, not just like one long run, that are just so in tune and perfectly fit each other as far as the material they work on and how they collaborate. I mean, you'd have to go back to someone like Stan and Jack and Stan and Steve, and even them. You know, obviously those were very contentious. Their collaboration together is now running on over a decade. Almost everything they put out is great, even if you're not a fan of the genre. And Criminal, these kind of crime noir stories, but also, you know, very realistic, or however you want to call it, just perfect. And the coloring as well by Jacob Phillips, always the cherry on top, even though previously it was by Elizabeth Breitweiser, who's also one of the greatest colorists of this era. Just really nothing at all bad to say about Criminal. And for those who pick up the single issues, Brubaker always has a little extra tidbit: the essays, the letters pages, and the spot illustrations that Sean Phillips does. Criminal's a great package. That's my number one. I was debating over, what's going to be number one, but really when you just boil it down to it, it's just quality wins out, and I think very few quality every single issue. My number two is going to be Dial H for Hero, and I love the writing, I love the characters, but really this is like significantly 51% or possibly way more all on Joe Quinones, who every single issue does something experimental, something that you would never expect. A lot of it boils down to when he imitates other art styles and other creators, when certain people use the H style and transform. But there have also been other moments where there was the one issue where there was basically like a mini comic. I mean, it's not like the single issue, they didn't do something really cool with the printing, but you essentially had a mini comic within the comic on each page, and two parallel stories with different art styles, and it's all by Joe Quinones, and it's just ridiculous. That this is definitely has to be Eisner nominated. And number three, also pulling through significantly from the art side, is Silver Surfer Black. I really love Tradd Moore's art on here. He's done a lot of great work before and a few mainstream things like Ghost Rider, but I think this was his opportunity. Basically, this is not derogatory, but essentially he got the opportunity to ride Donny Cates' coattails, because Donny Cates is like the most hyped up creator of this year, possibly, besides what I'm going to get to next. But Tradd Moore, working with Donny Cates, was able to just be on the biggest stage, and everyone was looking at this book, and just ridiculous art. And I think Donny Cates as well, perhaps more than pretty much anyone, has been pretty close to Stan Lee's original characterization of Silver Surfer as a very detached and philosophical kind of being. And I loved every page of this series, even slightly having to cringe past Null, which I don't really have much interest at all in Null and that kind of mythology that Donny has built up in Venom and elsewhere. But despite that, this pulled through for me completely. And I think it's really awesome that Marvel has decided to put this, whereas previously only the Grand Design books and I think History of the Marvel Universe are getting that treatment. So since you're going to see a in continuity book reprinted in that format, because it really deserved it. My number four, I'm totally cheating, and I'm saying Dawn of X. And I do want to point out, though, that I'm picking Dawn of X and not House of X Powers of 10. That's my personal preference. I enjoyed the whole ride of Hoxpox, but I was glad to make that jump and into ongoing multiple creators, an X-Men line. and not a everything you know is changed 12-issue giant maxi series. And then basically, if I want to get granular, it's going to, the thing is, basically every week we review the X-Men books. We sort of say like, oh, this one is going up on my list, or this is my order. And so I tried to think. I've been enjoying most of Dawn of X. Tried to think which one is the standout, and I think because some of the series are constantly jockeying each other, I cheated and went this direction. So my standouts at this moment are definitely Marauders, New Mutants, and X Force by this point. And Excalibur and X-Men are not remotely far behind. And then Fallen Angels is not included in this list.
No.
And number 5, I had to go to my nerd brain, and I'm going to give it to History of the Marvel Universe. And it, again, I think, I mean, Criminal is a whole class of its own, but otherwise, besides Dawn of X, all of my picks, interestingly, are mostly due to the art. And History of the Marvel Universe is just every page completely jaw-dropping, and Mark Waid drilling into that nerd brain, chronological, everything with an index and back. I love it. It's exactly the book for me. Even though it's like the last 2 issues, I'm like, okay, I read all of this as it came out and have poured over it multiple times, or I don't care about any of this.
Mm-hmm.
So there were definitely issues that stood out more than the others, and issues that were more unique and interesting than the others. But that's my number 5. And then I won't go into these much, but to cheat even more, I do have 2 runner-ups, and I'll give that to Ghost Rider and Aquaman equally, just because those are 2 kind of regular books, which I also note interesting. Besides Dawn of X, which is another cheat, I don't have any like regular ongoing books in my top 5, but Ghost Rider and Aquaman are 2 of my favorite characters, and 2 books which kind of got, which I've been enjoying. I wouldn't say either book, honestly, is like great if they don't belong in my top 5, but I'm going to give them the honorable mention as far as kind of just mainstream big 2 books that I'm enjoying every issue they come out. That's my top 5. I don't know that we necessarily have or need reactions to each other's unless something really surprises us or something. Otherwise, Dan, you can take it away.
All right. So just like Vince said, when I was looking at this list, I was just thinking about the books that I can recall, reading over the past half year that, when I saw them on my list, I was really excited to read them and, never got bored about reading them. So for me, number 5, I'm going to work number 5, work my way up to number 1. Number 5 for me is Silver Surfer Black. I really just the art alone is amazing, and then the storytelling is awesome. The only reason why I put it on number 5 is I actually didn't finish it, so I don't think it's fair to move it up higher but from what I read, I really enjoyed it. What's it? Can you hear me?
Oh, never mind.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I just want to make sure. Okay. But yeah, so I'm probably gonna be getting that in trade or collection, whatever that is. So we'll see how that goes. Number 4 for me is Black Cat. So this series really surprised me, as it probably surprised a lot of you guys when I talked about it being so good. I just think it benefited from really straight storyline, and some great characters, with a little bit of history that I was familiar with. So really enjoyed it. Some great art going on there as well. Number 3 for me is Daredevil by Chip Zdarsky. I've read a lot of Daredevil this year, and reading Chip Zdarsky's run kind of fell into that same vein of storytelling that I grew, accustomed to with, Bendis and Brubaker. Not the same, obviously, but in the same vein. And I really enjoyed where he's taking those characters, especially the Kingpin and Matt, obviously. So that is my 3rd pick. Number 2 is Detective by Tomasi. It's one of those, those series that I can just pick up and read any week and enjoy it. And the art has always been pretty consistent, I think, pretty well done. And I just really like Tomasi's writing. I think I can really get into his writing. It's not bogged down by a lot of exposition, and yeah, he makes it interesting. It's a really fun book. It's not like high stakes, kind of a lot of not like on the deeper level as the Batman series, but that's not a bad thing. And number one, obviously for me as well, is Criminal. I've gotten into it ever since I started reading it, and I've been on an Ed Brubaker binge ever since I finished his Daredevil stuff and got into Criminal, and yeah, so I'm just hype on that stuff. So yeah, that's my top 5. I think that's a pretty good list.
Okay. Vince, do you have any comments, or should I just jump in my list?
No, just besides the thing I say every week that I'm surprised Dan likes Black Cat that much.
Yes, I do.
Apparently, it's really good.
Yeah, but I haven't read a single issue, so I'm not going to diss him or anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so I haven't read all that many new comics this year. So I kind of feel like my list is a little weaker, but I'm all right with that. For number 5, I'm going to say Marvel Comics 1000. Does that count? It's not really a series, but I thought it was. I thought the issue was a lot of fun. There's some really great little stories in there. The title's stupid. It should have just been Marvel Comics 80th anniversary or whatever. But overall, I thought it was a lot of fun. So I really like that. For number 4, I think I would say it's Marauders. I love every issue of Marauders so far. There's only been 4 issues, but it's been fantastic. It's my favorite Dawn of X book. And I thought about cheating after you did, but I think we'll leave at Marauders for now. Although New Mutants and X-Men are both contenders, I think. For number 3, I would say is Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. This is basically just Matt Fraction playing to his strengths. A lot like Hawkeye or Sex Criminals. It's very much based around humor and his dialogue, and not so plot driven, which I think is where Fraction really excels. And this book is consistently hilarious, and I love it. Number 2 is Amazing Spider-Man by Nick Spencer. This is the best Spider-Man has been in at least a decade. I would argue longer. I don't know that. I know Vince won't agree with me. I think this is the best Spider-Man has been since at least before the Clone Saga. It's everything I want from a Spider-Man book. Up until like the last couple issues, which have not been very good. But that aside, it's been everything from a Spider-Man book, and I absolutely adore it. And number 1, of course, as you all expected, is Immortal Hulk. Immortal Hulk, every issue is incredible. I keep waiting for Ewing to slip up and do something, I don't know, bad, but it hasn't happened yet. And Bennett's art is constantly great. They've only had 2 or 3 fill-in artists, but each time it's with a purpose to fit the tone of the story or the tone of that issue. And it's so good. And the 2 of you should jump on that as soon as possible. I know you're waiting for to read it collected, but just get in on that.
I need to get around to reading that at some point.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my list.
Yeah, all I will say in reaction to actually both of yours is that I don't read Daredevil. I don't read Immortal Hulk. Those are both super acclaimed books by pretty much everyone who reads them. Maybe I'll catch up for the new year. Maybe that'll be a New Year's resolution. Immortal Hulk, quite a bit more to catch up on than the other, but we'll see.
Yes.
They did recently release
They
did recently release the first hardcover for Immortal Hulk, and it collects like the first 10 issues or so. And then you can catch up digitally the rest of the way or something like that. But yeah, I'm not sure, if it's impossible to say whether they'd be on my list if I read them. But I wanted to acknowledge that absence.
I also want to give a quick honorable mention to Avengers. Not because I like it, because I don't like it. I don't like Jason Aaron, but he introduced Boy Thing, and Boy Thing's my new favorite Avenger. So I want to mention it.
Yeah, I have thought about dishonorable mentions, and I think I have one in mind, but I don't even remember what it is. But I figured best to not dwell too much on negativity.
Yeah.
All right, so that's that. Now our next segment, it's kind of going to be a little more freeform, and maybe for this we'll do a little bit more popcorn style. So this, we're going to highlight some of the writers and artists, and I mean, if you have any colorists, letterers, cover artists, editors, whatever, people on Twitter, I don't know, feel free. And the idea for this is basically writers and artists that either had a really strong year that we want to highlight, or like a most improved kind of thing, or people that we discovered for the first time. And particularly if they don't overlap with our top 5. But obviously there are going to be some people that work on books in our top 5 that we want to give a little bit more thoughts on as well. So I'll kick us off, and then I think let's try and sort of do some popcorn. We'll jump around as each person brings up a creator or a set of creators. But I'll talk about one which Matt will probably want to add to.
Mhm.
I want to definitely call attention to Jonathan Hickman. We both talked about Dawn of X, but also Matt as well did not make it House of X, Powers of 10. He made it Marauders, and I cheated and did Dawn of X, which won like 1.5 out of 5 is Hickman. But I will give Hickman major credit for reinvigorating X-Men, not just with me and with us, but within the wider comic book, industry and audience. Which, considering some of the recent period as well as just the past decade and in general, and even Marvel's own efforts, quite a feat. It's hard to pin down, attribute, who to blame / give credit for that, but Hickman is definitely a crucial part of that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought Hoxpox they're good comics. Not one of my favorites, but they're good, and they were, I think, necessary. X-Men had been in a real rut for a long time, and Hickman coming along and giving it the kick in the ass that it needed was fantastic, and it's led to, I don't know, the best era of X books in a long time.
Yeah. We'll talk about some of these things, which I'm about to sort of diss a little bit later in a segment. But I think what Hickman accomplished with House of X is he made X-Men, he made that maxi series a water cooler comic book, if you want to call it that, which is rare, is sort of rare. And Marvel and DC attempt it 3 times a year with their event comics. And yeah, House of X, Powers of 10, it is an event comic. You can call it an event comic. It deserves to be called one, and it was marketed as one. But I think it overshadowed exponentially anything similar that Marvel and DC attempted this year that were promoted and presented as actual traditional event comics.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of that is due to the fact that it had a goal, it had an objective, it was building to something. While I find a lot of Big Two events are kind of aimless, and even if they're trying to build something, it's generally not interesting. Absolute Carnage, what was that exactly establishing? Anything?
It's just it's extra issues of Venom. That's how I see it.
Right. Which is fine, I guess, but Hoxpox had a goal and an objective, and it pulled it off. So I still hate the name Hoxpox, but I'm not going to say the whole thing.
Yeah. All right. Who has another they want to give credence to?
I don't want to linger on this too long because I already talked about him, but I don't think we can get through this segment without mentioning Al Ewing. not just for Immortal Hulk, but for really all the work he's done this year. He's been kind of on the back burner at Marvel for a while now. He had Ultimates and Ultimates Squared, which people who read loved all 4 of them. And he's been putting out solid work for a while now, while flying under the radar. And with Immortal Hulk, and he's jumping onto Guardians now, I think his career is only going to get bigger and better. And I'm very excited to see that. That's really it. I don't think there's anything else we can talk about him. I already mentioned him earlier.
All right, Dan, who's on your short list?
I kind of had to go 2 here. Peter Tomasi. I mean, I already talked about a little bit in my top 5, so I won't go into too much. But just reading his stuff for the first time really got me into him, and I think has helped me kind of get more into like DC, I guess, a little bit. He breaks it down for people who are just starting to get into those characters. And then I also got to go with Donny Cates. Silver Surfer Black, Absolute Carnage. I also thought was pretty good, concerning what a lot of us probably had ideas about going into it. But overall, I really do like Donny Cates' writing. There's a lot of things, obviously, he's written in the past that I plan to go back and kind of read through. But this is probably my first exposure with him as a writer, and I don't know. I kind of like both of them, and it's interesting to read more modern stuff now after catching up on a lot of stuff in the past. So, but yeah, those are my 2.
You should definitely read Tomasi's Superman because it's so good.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that for sure.
I know you're not traditionally into Superman, but his book is so good.
Well, I have
It's a shame it got dropped for this Bendis shit.
Yeah, I'm getting more into Superman though. I have Red Sun sitting on my desk downstairs, so hopefully I can read that.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll just add to the chorus on Donny Cates. Was not keeping up with Guardians of the Galaxy, but just also generally within the industry and everything like that. Donny Cates really on top of things. I'd say he's the most popular and divisive and attention-grabbing creator of the year across the business.
Yeah.
Hickman kind of in a different kind of way, but Donny Cates really was able to Venom has been going on. That started in 2018, and there are other things that he was putting together, but 2019 is when he really became like arguably the most popular writer in comic books besides maybe Tom King.
Right.
And again, it was like night and day. He really blew up, and as far as everything can tell, he's just going to keep going on to bigger and better things, especially as Marvel struggles or whatever, however you want to say it. In certain senses, some of their talent they're not the best at developing, and also, they're constantly losing a lot of their top creators to independent work and other things like that. And so, in an era when obviously Mark Waid is kicking and Jason Aaron is kicking, but they've been around for years and years, especially Mark Waid. So Donny Cates is really like at the top of the mountain at Marvel and the industry as a whole. And both Silver Surfer Black and Absolute Carnage I enjoyed as well. The former, obviously.
Yeah.
I'll keep going because I threw together a bit of a list here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to give, even though we don't really read these books, I want to give a shout to Sean Gordon Murphy and Daniel Warren Johnson. Murphy for his White Knight saga thing, which I think didn't even start in 2019, but the sequel has started. And then Daniel Warren Johnson basically following the similar footsteps with his one-on-one book, which literally just released like last episode of this show. But both of them, I feel it's interesting that they are, even though I don't think White Knight is actually Black Label, I'm not sure. I think it is actually. But both of them, in my opinion, are using DC's creation of Black Label in the way that I want it to be used. They're telling interesting Elseworldsy stories, and they're writer artists who are doing the whole book top to bottom and have a great presence on social media and within the community and everything. And it's great to see that kind of indie mainstream approach. And then a second group, similar kind of realm as that, is basically the Cartoonist Kayfabe guys, which this is a sort of a plug. If you don't watch Cartoonist Kayfabe, if you haven't checked it out on YouTube, check it out. And that's Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg and occasionally Tom Scioli. But alongside their YouTube channel, which lots of people who've checked it out have found really fascinating, they've also kind of made a lane for themselves within the mainstream. And Ed Piskor kicked that off with X-Men Grand Design, which wrapped up this year, but goes back a few years. And then that gave way for Tom Scioli to do Fantastic Four Grand Design. And Scioli had other things this year. He had like GoBots at IDW, and he's about to put out a Jack Kirby biography down the line. And Jim Rugg is working on something. It may be a Grand Design, it may be something else. But he's been, if you follow their channel, he's been secretive about his next work. So presumably it's something big too, or something high profile. And so exciting to see when that gets announced and everything like that. And Jim Rugg as well, well, blah, blah, blah. So I would, and similar to Murphy and Johnson, they're kind of building a lane for themselves as indie auteurs, basically convincing the big two to let them do whatever the hell they want out of continuity and stuff, which I'm all for, because the main books are sometimes seen out of continuity anyways, so they might as well be good. That's my. I'll popcorn to someone else before I get a few more.
I don't know. It might be worth mentioning Tom Taylor. He's blown up this year. I guess he really moved past his Injustice niche more the past couple years, but this year between Deceased and Friendly Neighborhood, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, he's really blown up in popularity. I personally don't like his writing, but if we're talking about writers who stood out, I think he's an important voice.
Yeah, I think he as well, similar to Johnny Cates, really had an explosive year this year. I didn't read Deceased. Yeah, but Mike and Dan, didn't you read some of Deceased?
Did I?
I don't remember. I thought you did, but Mike really enjoyed Deceased. Maybe it was Ginger Dan, like way back. He may have read the first issue or two. But against all odds, including the name, the premise, the covers, pretty much everyone I know loved Deceased.
Yeah, apparently.
And yeah, Friendly Neighborhood, we've kind of we've said our spiel on that every time we review it.
Mm-hmm.
There were definitely standouts. There's a section, it's the next section, best issue of the year. I didn't put a ton of thought into that, so I don't know that I don't have anything I'm bringing to the table. Mm-hmm. But I would say some of those Friendly Neighborhood issues, the ones we actually liked, would have been in contention for that for me.
Yeah.
I think, is Tom Taylor the new Suicide Squad book that just launched?
Yes.
Okay. Again, it's like, I guess that's a high-profile book for DC. I have no idea what it's going to sell. It's totally not something I'm interested in reading.
No.
So it's hard to say, what he's pushing for, what he really wants. And obviously, he did get a Spider-Man book. He got the secondary Spider-Man book, which should be a big deal. But
I think it is a big deal.
Yeah, but a lot of people are kind of waiting for him to get something huge, especially after the massive success, not just reaction and critically, but the sales of Deceased. People were guessing, is he going to get Batman after Tom King? I mean, he technically could still, since we know Tinian's run is limited up through 100. I think that's still the case. I don't know. I mean, it's not like there's any room on Superman or anything like that, but who knows what Tom Taylor could get next. We know DC is going to milk Deceased just like they milked Injustice, and he'll kind of stay in that lane. And but we'll see if there's a book that he writes that we'll actually read in 2020.
Yeah, we'll see.
And then I'll close out my section with some artists. One is Trad Moore from Silver Surfer Black, which I basically said everything I wanted to say on him, but huge artistic explosion and really getting mainstream attention from a very indie and off the beaten path style. And a little bit more house style, but I want to give a shout out to Jamal Campbell, who, like Tom Taylor, worked on stuff that I didn't really like that much. He drew Naomi, but Naomi looks really, really nice. And stuff, maybe some Young Justice. I don't know. It seems like Bendis is attached to him, and he's doing that like YA Green Lantern book called Far Sector. I don't know. Again, I have no interest in that book, but Jamal Campbell is a really great artist, and I'm excited to see how DC scripts from Coffin Bound and Maria Levette from Faithless. And both of those were books that I kind of limped through because I didn't really like the premise and the writing, but the art is just so unique and amazing on both those books. And it seemed, at least, they're both indie books, but it seemed that they got a lot of great attention. And both of these are artists that are really early in their career within, as far as I know, I think Western comics. I think both of them have somewhat respectable careers, or at least, have it's not like this is their first thing ever. I think they're both obviously foreign based on their names. But I'm excited to see where they go next. I think both of them, I wouldn't put either of them on Superman or Spider-Man, but the company should be jumping to find a niche for these artists. I mean, they could. They don't have identical styles, but I think both could work in like a supernatural realm or a espionage realm and things like that. There are ways that you could really flex these artists, and they definitely are amazing enough that they could be on any book, really. And then my kind of honorable mention, because his actual career is literally just like on step one, is Tom Riley, who was someone and basically him just putting out commission after commission, and I have my notifications on for his Instagram. Everything he puts out, I love it. He's got a very classic style. He's kind of in that vein of Chris Samney. And at the very end of this year, he's like, finally, he's taking that first step. An editor finally took notice after presumably people have been retweeting him all through the year within the industry and loving his stuff. And so he did it. He did a short in that Thor 80th anniversary thing, and he did a little piece of an Immortal Hulk issue, which is, of course, one of the biggest, highest profile books in the industry. So definitely more eyes on him, and I'm excited to see him get something substantial, because I would say my favorite discovery of the year creatively. You guys have any further?
In terms of artists, I don't know if I really have any on my list. I don't put as much thought into art as I do into writing. That's just kind of how my brain works. And I don't know if I can start listing off artists that I like who are working currently, but I don't know how much of it would apply to specifically this year. Like, I think Ryan Ottley's been great in Amazing Spider-Man, but how much Spider-Man did he actually draw this year? I don't remember. He's been really on and off. I think Jen Bartel constantly puts out good work when she gets work. But again, what did he do this year? I don't remember. So I don't know how much I can really add to the conversation in terms of artists.
Yeah, I was gonna say Trad Moore as well. So you've already pretty much said everything I was gonna say. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, I had him, and Black was in both of our top fives. So definitely big thumbs up to Trad Moore.
Yep.
All right, our next section, best single issue. I did not really come prepared for this. I mentioned earlier some of those friendly neighborhood issues may have been in there. I didn't think too much harder on it, so I will let those who do have something continue.
Dan, you got nothing?
No, I mean, I can't really pinpoint a single issue that really stood out to me that much, but
okay.
All right, then it's that show.
Yeah, I've got something. So I was going to. I almost gave it to the Spider Bite issue of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which is kind of ironic considering I was just dumping on Tom Taylor. That issue is really solid. It's one of the 3 issues of Friendly Neighborhood that I liked, and I highly recommend it. But I ended up going with Amazing Spider-Man 29 instead. This is the issue where Pete almost proposes to MJ, which doesn't really count, but it's a super sweet issue. The conversation when he talks to MJ, not MJ, I'm sorry, when he talks to Aunt May about MJ and about love in general is one of the best Aunt May moments ever, maybe definitely in a long time. It's an almost entirely self-contained issue. The stuff with Chameleon and with Teresa Parker is carried on in the current 2099 stuff. But you can pick up this issue as it is without having read the rest of Spencer's run, and you'll probably love it. It's great. Pete and MJ stuff is great. Pete and Aunt May stuff, and that's Spider-Man. So that's my pick for single issue of the year. Amazing Spider-Man 29. I love this issue.
Cool. All right. And our next section, collection talk. This is kind of covering collections that came out this year, or really that we bought this year. I mean, it could be something from way long ago if we bought it this year. Either things that we were very excited for to finally get reprinted or to come out, our favorite books in terms of content or design, or that we enjoyed the most reading, things like that. So I will start us off, and I believe every book I'm going to mention is I've featured in a haul segment. So skim through some previous episodes for further thoughts. So I'll try and keep it slim. Honorable mention of sorts, and that is Absolute Swamp Thing, Volume 1. And again, see the haul. I love the design of the book. But also, like, I'm not 100% into the absolute format, and I'm still unsettled / slightly negative on the recoloring. So ultimately, years from now, if DC decides, hey, we're going to put out a kind of traditional omnibus thing together, I would probably get rid of these and go with that. But also, this is like one of my favorite characters and one of my favorite runs, so I don't really know what I do. But this is a really, really cool book, and I think it's ridiculous that it came out in 2019. It's got the nice velvety kind of texture. Now, I don't know, do we want to popcorn it? I could go one at a time.
Okay. Here's a book that I don't remember if I bought it this year. It didn't come out this year, but I read it this year. And since we're including that in the criteria, I'm going to talk about it real quick. And that's the Super Sons Omnibus. This book is just so much fun. I love John Kent, and I miss him. It's more great Tomasi stuff. Again, Dan, you should read this also. And the art by Jorge Jimenez is amazing. It's fun comics, and that's I don't know. It's the very least I want from my comics. So I really enjoyed that. That's all I've got for now. I've got one more book later.
Yeah, I want to, after the fact, I want to give a little bit of shine to Jorge Jimenez in kind of our writers and artists realm. I don't think he didn't have the solo spotlight this year that he did previously with Super Sons. He was kind of a cog in the machine, not in a negative way as much, but he was a contributor on Justice League and some Superman stuff, I think, as well. But I think he's one of my favorite recent artists, and I love his energy and attitude on social media and within his art. I think he really captures the Superman flavor and just mainstream comic books in general with Superman Very interested to see how he goes next because he's going to be one of the Batman artists, which I wouldn't immediately peg him as a fit for that, but I'll be interested to see how he does fit.
Yeah, I think his art's amazing. It's cartoony and it's kinetic, and it's awesome. It's really good. All right, Daniel, you got anything?
I don't have it with me, but if I did have it here, I would show off the Revenge of the Black Panther Epic Collection, which is all of the that Kirby Black Panther stuff that has gone uncollected, has gone out of print for too long now, and hard to find. And I'm so glad Marvel reprinted that. Just going off of the stuff before it, I really enjoyed all that stuff. What's the name of that guy? What's the name of the writer before him? Don McGregor?
Yeah, McGregor.
Yeah. So do scroll for that. I'm really excited to read that. I have it on my shelf at home. The other one that stood out to me, I'm not sure if it came out in 2019. Oh no, it came out October of 2018. Never mind. But yeah, that's the first one that came to my mind. Oh, that as well. Yep. All the Fantastic Four epics. That one especially. Yep.
All right, then I'm going to speed through. I talked about kind of the premise of this section. So as far as reprinted, that's mostly the rest of this section for me. I'm going to give major props to Marvel for two major collection lines, which happen to be humongous books. But they're finally getting the Conan license back and putting out these very comprehensive, beautifully restored Conan omnibuses for both Conan and Savage Sword. And I'm pretty sure, honestly, this first one may have come out in like 2018. I'm not completely certain. Yeah, it says 2018, but obviously volumes came out this year. I think actually the street date for this may have been like the first week of January, because I flipped through some of my IST orders to see what could qualify for this segment. And I'm excited to try out Conan. Major part of comic book history, obviously humongous runs through time, and I haven't read hardly any of it. And all of it intrigues me artistically and everything like that in the era. So very excited that these exist. And miraculously, they're pumping them out fast, similar to the way they handled the Master Kung Fu materials. So I might be done collecting these relatively soon, even though it's going to be several. In a similar realm, I want to give a shout out to the Timely's Greatest books. They have kind of confusing titles because this one is technically Timely's Greatest, The Golden Age Submariner, Bill Everett, The Pre-War Years. But I think there's no indication that we haven't seen any clue that there's going to be more yet. But in total, so far there will be about 4 of these. And basically, they're literally just Marvel's version of DC's Gold and Silver Bronze Age omnibuses, which DC has been doing for a while, but particularly the Golden Age ones, because Marvel, just like DC's characters, some mystery comics, Human Torch, Submariner comics, All Winners comics, and then other stuff. Similar to how Batman, for example, appeared in Detective Comics, Batman, World's Finest, whatever else. And Marvel had never taken an approach like that to jump across them and do chronological thing, even though there's not much continuity. If you wanted the material that's in this book, in their old Masterworks line, you'd need like 8 books. So I, as someone who's into the historical aspect of comics and Golden Age comics and some of these classic creators and characters, I was super excited when I saw this announcement. And probably this book in particular is the standout for me among that line that I was dying for. And in fact, like literally like less than 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, I basically made like a mock-up version of that book, which of course, it's not like I could have remotely conceivably custom bound that because it's books from 1939, but I came up with like what could have been contents and things like that. And then I've got two more, not quite as crazy on that level, but two series and material that I was just overjoyed to see collected this year. I've got Shazam, The World's Mightiest Mortal, Volume 1. This is the 1970s Shazam series, or at least half of it. Very excited to see this, and especially since I think the second movie is officially confirmed. Excited to see how DC keeps handling Captain Marvel's Marvel Family Shazam reprints. Namor the Submariner Omnibus by John Byrne, and surprise, it's by John Byrne and Jay Lee. So they went a little above and beyond with the contents and made it a thicker book. And this is one of the runs that I had always wanted a more comprehensive and more deluxe edition of, because they never really finished it before. So I was excited to have that.
If you were to recommend one of the two Namor books you just talked about, which would you prioritize?
Definitely John Byrne.
Okay. Because I'm thinking about picking one of them up.
Golden Age is a little clunky.
That Golden Age blog to read through, man, that's gonna be so wordy.
Maybe if you know how DC does the paperback conversions,
yes.
They split them in half or thirds. If Marvel all of a sudden does like that first volume is like affordable, I would recommend that without many qualms. But I would not get, and especially because they did so much restoration for these, this is $150 cover price, so it's not an easy taste test.
No. Okay. Well, I've got one more book, and that is The Amazing Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 4. This collects Amazing Spider-Man. Let me double check real quick. Yeah, 105 through 142. So it's the end of Stan Lee's run and the beginning of Jerry Conway's, which means that there's some really great stuff in here, like obviously Death of Gwen Stacy, and there's also some really shitty stuff in here, like Dr. Octopus trying to marry Aunt May. So, but regardless, I love this book. Vince, I'm sure will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is one of the first omnibus series to go to a fourth volume. Master of Kung Fu might have 4, but regardless, if you haven't figured it out yet, I like Spider-Man a little bit, and so I adore this book absolutely, and it's nice to have it sitting up there with the other 3.
Yeah, I think it's, besides Master Kung Fu, I think it's the only one to go to 4.
Which is weird that Master Kung Fu of all things.
No, Avengers Volume 4 came out this year as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they released 2 in the past 2 years, I think.
Yeah, and the other Volume 4, I think a lot. Fantastic Four is the one that a lot of people are waiting on.
Yes.
I don't. Well, yeah, that one obviously. But I was thinking more Silver Age style. Yeah, I don't own that book currently. I should probably double check that it hasn't ridiculously shot out of print all of a sudden. But I intend to get it at some point. I'm a little annoyed that it doesn't go to 150, and just because the original Clone Saga, it's kind of a mixed bag because it's sort of like 2 or 3 arcs, kind of. It's more like a subplot for most of it. Mm-hmm. And if you want more thoughts on that, go check out another channel on this, another video on this channel. But it would have been nice if it went to 150. But at the same time, I actually wish it didn't touch the Clone Saga at all, because the trade that collects the original Clone Saga also includes relevant arcs from Spectacular. So I would actually wish this omnibus stopped at like 137 or 8.
137, I think. Yeah.
But I'll get it.
I think 138 is Mind Worm, and that'll be the beginning of the Clone Saga.
And I will definitely not get a Amazing Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 5. But I imagine
I 100% would.
yeah,
Oh,
but
that'd be awful.
No, it would have the Clone Saga in it, which is great, and then it would have some other stuff.
Filler.
Yeah. I also would love. I already forgot if we mentioned it. I would love to see Uncanny X-Men Volume 4, but more importantly, I would love to see Volume 3 reprinted, please. I missed it, and now I can't get it.
There's another Volume 1 reprint coming out this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
if anyone's on the lookout, or if anyone at Disney wants to release New Mutants and somehow cause this, get on that.
Yep.
All right, Dan, did you have any last?
I guess I don't have it yet. I plan to get it. The Man in the Iron Mask. I guess is it? Yeah, Man in the Iron Mask. Iron Man omnibus that follows Kurt Busiek's Iron Man omnibus. Definitely gonna be picking that up at some point. Really nice to see that in oversized format now. I already read the Joe Quesada storyline, which I would suggest anyone who's remotely interested in Iron Man read that. It's pretty good, I think. But yeah, just interested to see all the stuff that comes after that. But yeah, I don't have it with me. If I would show it, but I don't. So.
All right, that's collection talk. And now our next section, this is kind of one I kind of threw together. And this is a little bit more wrap-up-y. So I figured we'd run through kind of the major things from 2019. Not so much news, but content-wise. And we can kind of give our quick reactions. And so I thought a major way to anchor this and tied into some of the things we've already talked about is let's talk about some of the high-profile series and events and stuff. So War of the Realms. What did we think about War of the Realms? I concur with Dan's shaking of the head. Not really a fan. Well, it didn't wow me. It wasn't really my thing. I could see if you were someone who's really into Jason Aaron's Thor, how you would appreciate it and enjoy it. And I think similar to what we'll talk about in a few seconds, they basically say, hey, creator who's writing the most impactful or hyped up ongoing series, do an event that's like 90% hinges on your series, and we'll just force every other book to tie into it. And I think Marvel and DC, there are events like that in the past, obviously. Like, honestly, you could say Infinity Gauntlet is a Silver Surfer book, and things like that. Those things go, those examples go way back. But War of the Realms is a Thor book, and then really all the Marvel events this year are just extensions of popular books.
Mm-hmm.
But War of the Realms, I was not a big fan. Didn't like a lot of the tie-ins and how it derailed certain books, stuff like that. I know Dan read it at the same time as well.
It's crazy.
I did not read War of the Realms because I don't care about Jason Aaron's Thor. If you remember back when we did the Fresh Start podcast and I read Thor #1, I had a very viscerally negative reaction to that book, and so I had zero interest in this event.
It's crazy too to note how quickly that got solicited for a trade too. Like I think it was solicited before the series actually ended, right?
I'm not going to claim specifically, but on that same note, I think it's interesting to note that it went to paperback.
Oh yeah.
Which there's no logic or sense to how Marvel and DC do these things, especially DC. But it's always interesting when a big promoted Marvel event book goes to paperback or standard-sized hardcover rarely and does not get an oversized hardcover. And that's the case for War of the Realms, and I'm seeing some people point that out or complain about it.
Yeah.
And that'll be especially very interesting whenever, at some point they'll start doing Thor by Jason Aaron omnibuses and stuff like that. And similar to certain other events which tie into major series like Secret Wars with Jonathan Hickman, it'll be interesting to see how they include or don't include War of the Realms in eventual Jason Aaron books. Yeah, was not impressive to me. And then the few like kind of extensions of it that are still lingering, besides Thor related stuff, like I think there's like some kind of like I guess Agents of Atlas I think is a War of the Realms like a thing that birthed out of it, the revival of that, and other things. So like as far as what I read and what I am interested in, it doesn't, as Matt said way earlier on the show, no real lasting impact.
Yep.
And then sort of chronologically, next would be Hox Pox from Marvel, which we mostly talked about. I think to sum it up, and then I'll let anyone else who has final thoughts. You know, it reinvigorated the X-Men franchise, sold like crazy, got acclaim. We were excited about it each week. Yeah, I think this was the one that, as we said, accomplished what it set out to do.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned how it was sort of a water cooler comic, and I think that aspect might have been more fun than the book itself. The speculation and the conversation week after week was always fun, even if the book was, I don't know. I mean, it's always good. It was never a bad book, but I think the conversation was more entertaining than the book itself.
Yeah. And then there's Absolute Carnage, which we also touched on a bit. This was something I enjoyed a lot in isolation, and again, to my War of the Realms point, and obviously House of X. This is really an extension of Donny Cates' Venom, and I'm sure it worked particularly well in that context, and it worked fine without it for us.
The Amazing Spider-Man and the Immortal Hulk tie-ins were both really great.
Yeah, it didn't derail any of those storylines, I don't think.
Nope.
Now, the final thing for Marvel, and Matt touched on it way earlier, is I guess Marvel Comics 1000/1001/Incoming, which we haven't read yet. But I guess at the core of those is this Masked Raider thing or whatever. Similar to Matt, I enjoyed Marvel Comics 1000. I enjoyed 1001 as well to a lesser extent. But the like core story or like this whole like mystery thing doesn't really engage me much.
I 100% forgot there was a core story or a mystery in that book at all. So yeah, it didn't engage me at all.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit of a letdown. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of the story, but I don't know. And also just the way the whole thing was contrived.
Since I believe Incoming picks up from this, sort of. Now, over in the DC corner, chronologically, but also not chronologically, the first major thing would be Doomsday Clock.
Yeah.
I think it was last episode or maybe the one before, which was the final issue of Doomsday Clock. I would just go to that because I went very extensively on that series and the finale. I will say, in summation, no good, both textually and on a meta level. It was just a groan every time that the issues get delayed more and more. It took over 2 years for these 12 monthly issues to come out. It seems to have negligible impact on the DC universe, even though it was promised as having this great impact, which everyone was looking forward to, which everyone wanted. But even if it was going to have impact, I don't like how it was executed. And obviously, there's the whole Watchmen thing, and I just hate pretty much how that was handled completely. And I am kind of I'm in the stubborn camp where I don't think it should exist at all.
Yeah.
But I guess we can look forward to 3 Jokers finally coming out.
No. We don't have to. I'm not looking forward to that at all. Remember when Doomsday Clock was billed as a Superman story? And then Superman was in 3 issues?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you can argue it definitely is a Superman story. I mean,
Kind of.
it's not like it's any kind of other story.
It's a Watchmen story.
Yeah, I guess, and that's like the worst part of it.
Yeah.
Um,
I also think it's great that they brought back the Kents just in time for Superman to reveal his secret identity. So they're going to be dead in 3 weeks.
if they even are alive.
Right. I fucking DC sucks. DC sucks.
I think this run, the Doomsday Clock must have started way before Bendis was even hinted at coming to DC.
I think so.
And then, of course, it was a Superman story, but then it was also, as I said, as far as negligible impact on the universe, there was supposed to be a Legion of Superheroes and Justice Society things. As I said, both of those teams, both of those properties came back within the universe unaffected by Doomsday Clock, literally on the same day. And I have no interest in like this current version of the Legion, to be honest, from Bendis.
Nope.
And we don't have a sign yet of what may be next for the JSA, but it'll probably be a Scott Snyder type of thing. And at one point I would have said no interest in that. Please give me Jeff Johns doing a victory lap. But at this point, given Doomsday Clock, given Justice Doom War, all right, Scott Snyder, show me what you can do with the JSA. Jeff Johns, please go waste your time on 3 Jokers and whatever the next shitty Green Lantern movie will be.
I never cared about the Legion to begin with, and I care about it even less now that Bendis is writing it and he's still butchering John. So I don't give a shit about that book.
Yep. So now DC books that were actually supposed to be out in 2019. Heroes in Crisis wrapped up this year, and I have similarly frustrated and negative thoughts toward it as I do Doomsday Clock.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, besides one major character, it doesn't seem to have had much of an impact on the DC universe. It's not like it was a genuine crisis, which is another nitpick from me. But as far as the character that it did impact, I just dislike it on almost every level.
Yeah. I kind of really care about like 3 DC heroes. I'm not that deep into DC comics, and 2 out of the 3 of them have been kind of completely destroyed in the past year or 2, and the third is Martian Manhunter, who I don't even know what's going on in that book anymore. I dropped that after the 4th issue or something.
Oh well, the Maxi series aside, he is alive in the final page of the most recent issue of Justice League.
Oh, he's back?
Yeah, so he is kicking, even though, of course, he had a Maxi series running the entire time he was dead.
Right.
So that's that. Dan, you didn't read Heroes in Crisis, right?
No, I think I read like 1 or 2 issues, and then I got bored, and I'm like, I can't read this.
Yeah, I don't fault you for that. It's similar to Doomsday Clock, I always hate reading it. The one thing I will give credit that it is a beautiful book. And I'll give Heroes in Crisis a little bit more credit on that level than Doomsday Clock, because to be honest, Gary Frank has never done a ton for me. Not really my preferred style, but Doomsday Clock, technically it looked nice.
Yeah, it's a pretty book.
And then from DC, and kind of we've already touched on it, is The Year of the Villain, which Justice Doom War at the core of it, the stuff in Justice League, at face value, I enjoy it. It's good fun. But this whole, the offer, the choice, whatever these like tie-in couple months parts of the story that affect almost every book, kind of a pain in the ass. Just a few of the books have standout arcs. Like we enjoyed the Detective Comic stuff. I've enjoyed the Aquaman stuff more or less. But just not a fan of Year of the Villain. And I don't really like these kinds of like year-long, slowly trudging marketing efforts where it's like if there's always an event running, there are no events. That's what a lot of people point out, and that's basically what Year of the Villain is. I mean, it's the same thing as it's basically a shitty version of Dark Reign, and I don't like Dark Reign at all.
No. Yeah. I agree.
And then, I mean, basically the way we run through it is that most of these are negative. The next one is Event Leviathan, which I think among the three of us, mostly I read. Wait, Matt, did you read Event Leviathan? Okay.
No, I dropped Bendis Superman last year.
But similar to some of the other events, this is a Superman event, even though it tried to pretend it was a line-wide DC event. And I didn't like it at all. It's basically a mystery, but there's no mystery. Like, you can't solve it. The mystery is there's just a reveal in the final issue. There's no real hints to it or anything like that, and the reveal's not interesting, and it trudges along. But again, the art by Alex Maleev is nice, and I have no interest to follow where Event Leviathan goes next. And again, sort of, kind of, it's a redo of the '80s story spearheaded by John Ostrander called, what the hell is it called? The Judas? No.
The Judas Contract.
No, not the Judas Contract. It's something imperative. I don't know, whatever. There was an arc that ran through Suicide Squad, Checkmate, Firestorm, Captain Atom, which was the exact same thing. It's, all of the organizations in the DC universe are collapsing and going to war with each other, and that was a lot better than Event Leviathan. It's also a kind of dumb name, like Event, whatever. So that's that. Those are the big things, and then one I wanted to mention some of the things that kind of the changes in the industry. Allegedly, a big deal this year was that Mad Magazine is ending. But I wanted to bring that up particularly because I thought about it, that I'm guessing the three of us and Mike, I don't think any of us have any remote attachment to Mad Magazine or any investment or any interest whatsoever.
Nope.
And I think that's just the reality of our generation and its relevance. Mm-hmm. So not something that we care about, not something that we're sad to see go. And that's just the reality. I mean, I don't feel guilty about that or anything. And I think even the people who, read Mad in its heyday, whether that's way back when it was a comic book published by EC, or kind of in its political satire heydays in, I don't even know when that would be, the 70s, 80s. I don't think any of them were super invested and excited when new issues of Mad Magazine came out.
Yeah.
And not to disrespect anyone who worked on it, and I couldn't tell you a single one of them either. But that's that. I thought it would be interesting to note that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of similar is the death of Vertigo, which I think on a certain level is very tragic, and on a super nerd level, it's mostly a pain for collectors, as every genuinely classic and well-deserved Vertigo title is up in the air for future reprints. Are they going to keep the Vertigo brand just as a logo for those books? Or, as we've already seen on some things already, is everything going to get a cringy black label logo? But with a few exceptions, similar to Mad, I don't think anything from Vertigo of substance, quantity-wise, has been a book to talk about or an amazing book over the past several years, with a few exceptions, like Sheriff of Babylon from Tom King and American Carnage from Brian Hill got a lot of hype. Well, not a lot of hype. Got a lot of critical acclaim, but not hype. I don't know why. I think it's a mix of some things that DC did in terms of their contracts and the renaissance of Image and other independent creators and everything like that. Like, there's 20 other independent publishers, which there's like 20 of now. But I think the sad reality is Vertigo just was past its expiration date. But at the same time, it's weird because there's a Sandman Universe line of books, as well as Hill House from Joe Hill. And both of those imprints, as well as Sort of Young Animal, which kind of still exists, all three of those could just be called Vertigo.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any further thoughts on the death of Vertigo?
Not really.
No.
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 And
I haven't read any Vertigo books, I don't think.
I thought you read Why the Last Man.
No.
Oh.
I had the first 4 books of Why the Last Man.
But speaking of Why the Last Man, while we're rambling, I don't know if either of you particularly care about this, but I didn't even realize until I was looking for top 5 series of the year. There was no Saga this year. We haven't had an issue of Saga for a year and a half now, which is wild. I have no idea when it's coming back, but hopefully soon.
But there was, for those who are interested and for those who got it, I'm sure the Saga Compendium for probably one of the major collection highlights of the year.
Absolutely, I would think so. I didn't get it myself because I'm collecting it in the hardcovers. But yeah, the compendium is a huge deal, and I think it's a great way to read what is widely considered one of the best indie books of the decade,
Forever. And then I want to kind of go in a little corner. I want to give a little bit of props to the critical success that Vault has experienced, Vault Comics, as well as TKO Studios. TKO, I think, launched this year, or maybe at the very end of 2018. And then from Boom, both the critical and commercial success they've had with some of their indie books, Once and Future, Something is Killing the Children, and Faithless. But that being said, we don't read any of those books. I read Faithless. Mike read Faithless. But otherwise, and I tried out Once and Future for a little bit. But we don't read any of those. But I wanted to give them a little quick second, as everyone I know who reads them enjoys them, and hopefully they have some more success in the new year. And maybe we'll try out some of those books.
Yeah. My taste is too basic for that shit. I read Spider-Man, Superman, and Saga. I'm not gonna read Faithless.
All right. Does anyone have any other kind of random stuff as we're in this section? I went through my list.
I don't think so. It's been a good year for One Piece.
That counts. I mean,
I guess that counts.
You could have put that in your top 5 series if you wanted to.
Okay, in that case, One Piece is taking Marvel Comics 1000's place.
Okay.
It's been a huge year for One Piece, and next year is going to be even bigger. I'm so excited.
And then, against possibly better judgment, I want to quickly run through. We're going to do a little in memoriam segment. Basically, me just listing names, which is all I do anyways. So we've got Bat and Lash, Ken Bald, Mark Alessi of CrossGen Infamy, James Hudnall, Monkey Punch, that's a manga creator. Also in that realm, Kazue Koike from Lone Wolf and Cub, Ernie Colon, Bill Shelley, one of the forefathers of fandom, Tom Spurgeon, major critic and journalist, Tom Lyle, major Spider-Man artist that we've talked about a lot, Gahan Wilson, Howard Cruz, and Jerry Alanguilan. And I probably missed like 1 or 2 really major ones, but I found a certain list and picked the ones that were kind of relevant. So that's that. Shout out to them. As I said, I would say Kazue Koike, that's a pretty big deal from Lone Wolf and Cub. And we've read a lot of Tom Lyle stuff through various things on this channel.
Yeah, we did.
And now the final segment on this long show, we're going to look forward in the future a little bit. Marvel and DC have released solicitation. Well, every publisher have released solicitations through March. Mm-hmm. And we have a little bit of a clue we have a little tidbits of clues on stuff past that. So how about we'll start with Marvel. Technically, this is kind of sort of a Marvel club. I'd say similar to what we've talked about ad infinitum previously on the show. There's a lot of hype still around the X-Men line.
Mhm.
And so as the new year turns over, they've got like 10 books coming out, adding to the line.
It's
And
nonsense. It's so much.
I'm, I guess, half excited about Wolverine from Ben Percy and Adam Kubert. That's really the only book that's officially announced and solicited that I actually care about, to be totally honest.
That's exactly how I feel. Yeah.
The others I'll try out, and then unless like I'm really surprised and enjoy it creatively, I don't care about the rosters and the characters and stuff like that. But I did want to mention, and I almost forgot this, that there's supposed to be an Ecstatics book, like an Ecstatics revival from Peter Milligan and Mike Allred. That was like informally announced in the back of a 80th anniversary one shot they did, and was talked about a little bit in press and on social media. But that all of that was before Hoxpox, before Dawn of X. So I don't know if that's a vaporware book. If that exists, if it's remotely landing in 2020, I would be very excited. But I also want to note at the same time that Mike Allred literally just announced a new book. I think it's probably a miniseries, but announced a new book within his kind of like extended Madman universe from Dark Horse, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that that's happening, but I would be excited.
That'd be awesome.
Then kind of other Marvel stuff. Dan, do you want to talk about any of your excitement about Iron Man 2020 or whatever the official name is?
No, I can't. I just can't wait for that series to be done. Dan Slott ruined my character, so
Hasn't even started yet.
it's already ruined.
Isn't it not Tony? Wasn't it recently revealed that he's not Tony? Tony's still dead?
Yeah, apparently like this whole thing where it's like actually not him. I don't even know. I stopped reading it like a month ago. So
okay.
It's like an AI construct of Tony or something.
Yeah, that's fucking wild.
Stupid is what it is.
And then on a similar wavelength, are you guys remotely excited or care about whatever Marvel dredging up with these various Marvels series?
Nope.
Like,
not at all.
Alex Ross is heading some kind of like sequel to Earth X, which somehow has to do with Marvels, which I care not remotely about.
No.
Man, I'm shit out of that.
But at the same time, separately, Kurt Busiek has some kind of Marvels thing where I think they're like one shots and he's curating artists and creative teams. And so as they come out, I will probably read some of them and be very excited and enjoy them. I think one of the first ones is a Namor issue. But you know, like as far as what Marvel expects my reaction to be, like I don't care. It'll just be good one shots.
Right. I mean, I like Busiek, so I'll probably enjoy them, but I'm not excited. It'll be whatever.
And it's weird to have these two things which seem like totally separate initiatives overlapping.
Yeah.
And then as far as January through March, like major titles besides Wolverine, Donny Cates on Thor. Do you guys care?
I haven't been following. I've not really been reading Donny Cates or Thor, so not really. I'm more interested in Ewing's Guardians.
Yeah, and that would be the next one, so we can talk about them at the same time. Is Ewing's Guardians, which is picking up from Donny Cates on Guardians. I'll definitely try out Ewing's Guardians. There will not be any Cosmic Ghost Rider involved, as far as I know, so that's exciting. But yeah, I mean, basically, since Jerry Duggan, every Guardians run is like, ooh, I'm gonna make it cool again, like, and I'm gonna make it like Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, or at least, like, I don't think Marvel ever actually says that, but like, that's the fan hope and reaction every time they announce a new post-Bendis team. And I think if anyone can do it, it could be Al Ewing, but it's always hard to say, especially on this profile book, which has a lot of MCU connections, parallels. It's hard to say, what Marvel wants, what Al Ewing could want. Maybe what Al Ewing wants is not what I want.
Maybe, but Ewing excels at cosmic shit. I didn't read all of Ultimates. I read Ultimates. I didn't read Ultimate Squared. But his cosmic stuff in that was always great. The cosmic stuff he's getting into in Hulk is awesome. So I have a lot of faith in his Guardians, and I'm probably gonna read all of it, most likely.
There's Ultimates, but then recall his other kind of cosmic book was Royals, the Inhumans, which
he wrote that.
Which 3 people who read, I heard that they really liked.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we read pretty much most of the major #1s on this show for the sake of trying them out. I'll try out Donny Cates' Thor. I'm not super excited. I don't like the hair. That's my nitpick. I don't like the way they're doing Thor's hair.
Sure.
Dan, are you excited for Thor or Guardians?
I mean, I'm probably excited. I'm more looking forward to Guardians, just because I've kept up with those characters more so than Thor. Yeah, I might jump on that. We'll see.
We're gonna go over 2 hours. Mike's gonna have a bitch fit.
He's gonna the video.
And on that note, I'd say let's not even go into it much, since we haven't even read Incoming, which I think this comes out of. But I guess Marvel's next big event, which might be starting in April or something, is Empire with a Y. And it's something cosmic and maybe has to do with Hulkling becoming Captain Marvel or something. And there's a sword.
What? I haven't even heard of this.
It's a thing.
Okay.
You can Google it after. But
I will.
Exactly. We don't know anything about it. We haven't read Incoming, so we'll try it out. Now, over on the DC side, literally January through March, giant one-shots each month. We start with Wonder Woman 750. I'm excited. I've enjoyed pretty much all of these huge anniversary Hallmark issues from DC since they did Action. So I like Wonder Woman as a character. I don't really have any interest in the current run or recent runs, but I'm sure there will be some gems in here.
Yep.
And then same exact thing, Flash 750. Exactly the same, not too much interest in the current run. I'm sure there will be gems. And I'm honestly, out of the 3, way more excited for the Robin 80th anniversary issue, that's what they're calling because they couldn't figure out any math to make it a huge number.
Fair enough, I guess.
And then big DC stuff, it's basically the Batman and Tom King realm, because James Tynion is starting on Batman maybe next week. And I'm cautiously optimistic. I was kind of getting tired of Tom King, even though I didn't remotely read the entire thing. I'm excited to see a new voice, and Tynion has some half interesting ideas. Honestly, I don't really get excited about Batman runs, to be honest.
No.
Even though I like reading Batman. And then Tom King is going over to Batcat, which I guess I'm excited about, just to see how he actually handles the relationship and how DC is going to have their cake and eat it too. And Tom King is also going to be doing Strange Adventures, which I'm prepared to either really, really love or really, really hate. And it's really a coin flip, because I like Adam Strange. I like those kinds of classic Silver Agey kind of characters, and I'm very nervous that he's going to make Adam Strange this suicidal deadbeat dad fuck up.
Almost certainly.
Which they've already done in 1990, drawn by Andy Kubert. And then I guess sometime in 2020, I would imagine in 2020, Scott Snyder is going to do his next major shenanigan. Maybe the next Crisis. I don't know. And I guess Jeff Johns' Three Jokers is coming out. I don't know, not that much to talk about DC. And also, Robert Venditti taking over Justice League, not really much interest for me.
Yeah, that's a choice, I guess.
Do you guys have any other things that you know are coming as far as single issues and periodicals or events?
No.
Not really.
I mean, we're gonna get the reveal of Kindred in Spider-Man, but
I mean, you think that'll be in 2020.
you're right. It might not be. I'm pretty sure it's gonna be. I'm pretty sure the build up to number 50 is gonna be that exactly. But
Yeah.
something like that.
Actually, I didn't even really think of a lot of the ongoing stuff. I was mostly thinking of number ones, which that's part of the problem.
Sure.
But yeah, in general, Amazing Spider-Man, I'm excited to keep reading that. Excited to get out of this 2099 stuff,
Yeah.
whatever this arc is. But also, there's both the Kindred thing, and there's also stuff with MJ that we will connect back to. And I'm always excited to see how Nick Spencer furthers plot lines with MJ.
Yes, absolutely.
Also, on that same note, I'm excited to keep following Aquaman because Mara's about to give birth in like a month, and there's going to be Aqua Baby again. And based on the solicits, they're already like kind of teasing and threatening that there's going to be some bad shit. But I highly doubt they're going to pull that trigger for the second time and in 2020. So I'm excited to see how that goes. And I'm sure there are other books with exciting developments. And then, because we're all fans of haul segments and collections and stuff like that, there are some exciting collections coming out in the new year. I think literally like a week or two from now is Hulk by Peter David on the list. Which
So excited for that book.
I'm incredibly excited. Definitely going to be a day one buy for me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait for the second one to be solicited. And yeah, that's something that, I mean, technically before it was announced, I had all that material, but definitely one of the most requested giant hardcovers that Marvel has ever had. And I am beyond excited to jump on board and upgrade. And then this is really, I think this is the thing that only I care about, but I'm very excited about the Swamp Thing by Nancy Collins omnibus, which is a run which I didn't ever expect to get collected. And back to something everyone kind of cares about, or at least will care about eventually, is Justice League International Omnibus Volume 2, which will be very exciting. But now that we're in the DC realm and things that are past January, it's all up in the air. Likewise, the Legion of Superheroes 5 Years Later Omnibus, which is going to be a massive thing. And very excited to see Power Shazam finally getting collected. And then there's the real big elephant in the room of John Byrne's Superman.
Ooh. Rip.
We will see how DC decides to fuck us over once it finally is fully solicited and reaches the stands.
If it is.
It does, yeah. It's a big if.
Yep.
I'm prepared to boycott it. Or maybe I'll just succumb. I'm not sure.
I mean, it depends on how it's handled, I guess.
Okay, so that is our massive show.
Yeah.
If we cut it off right now, we'll be under 2 hours.
Let's do it.
Do you guys have any final thoughts in 1 minute? I do not.
No, 2020 is going to be fun.
Yes.
So tune in next week where we will talk about new issues as we do every week and a retro book which will be revealed as a surprise on the air and other things. And we might have some weird developments upcoming.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.